Donald Trump's federal indictment is once again driving the Republican Party to a moral and political crossroads. So let's examine the starkly different responses by two Republican congresspeople considered by many to be moderate. Intrigued? Then click that like and subscribe and enjoy the video. So something I've said before, and something I mostly stand by, is the idea that if there's such a thing as a moderate Republican in today's GOP, they are few and far between. And usually when they demonstrate their so-called moderation, it's in the form of like self-deprecating humor, the occasional appearance on CNN or MSNBC, and then maybe, every now and then, a criticism of an element of their party, which is usually bracketed in between criticisms of the opposition, and, or, you know, there's usually like an implied false equivalence there. So I want to demonstrate in the aftermath of Donald Trump's federal indictment for 38 federal crimes involving the willful retention of national defense information by Jack Smith, special counsel, and a jury of his peers in Florida. I want to examine two responses from two different Republican congresspeople. So not a Republican senator and a Republican congressperson. These people are relatively symmetrical. They are both Republicans. They are both in the House of Representatives. One represents Nebraska. The other represents South Carolina. The first I want to look at is Don Bacon, a Republican congressman of Nebraska who is depicted by many to be a moderate. And then the second person will be Nancy Mace of South Carolina, who is also a Republican congressperson, who is also considered by many to be moderate as well. But let's look at how they reacted, each of them, to the news of the Trump indictment. So this is from a CNN article. I think it was on June 9th when it was originally published, when it may have been even before the indictment was unsealed, as a matter of fact. It was just the reporting about the indictment. And so Don Bacon, who again has a reputation of being a moderate, said, Republican Representative Don Bacon of Nebraska, meanwhile, called the obstruction allegations against Trump inexcusable. As a retired brigadier general who worked with classified materials my entire career, I am shocked at the callousness of how these documents were handled, Bacon told CNN on Friday. The congressman has long been critical of Trump and represents a swing state in Nebraska. Okay, that is a relatively mature response, right? And this, again, I'm pretty sure this was before the 49-page indictment was unsealed. This was just based on credible reporting. But Bacon had the courage and the moral fortitude to say, listen, the allegations of obstruction from Trump, if they're true, inexcusable. And he relayed his own personal experience as a former officer in the military who had to handle national defense information. And so he was able to parlay that into again, a persuasive case. Basically, listen, I had to handle national defense information. I had to handle it maturely and compliantly with federal law and responsibly. And so if what the allegations are against Trump are true, that's despicable. I also want to play a quick clip from him more recently, since the indictment has been unsealed, in which he goes into more detail about his opinion on the matter, and then again we will turn to Nancy Mace. So let's hear what Representative Don Bacon of Nebraska has to say after that article, after the indictment was unsealed.
Don Bacon of Nebraska, a Republican who won in a swing district, won by about 5,000 votes in the last election. It's a place where it could go either way. That's a toss-up district. Here's what he had to say, again, a Republican from Nebraska, about the Trump indictment.
Well, I think it's obvious what the president did was wrong, and we just got to be honest. I mean, to have thousands of secrets in your house, showing them to people that were not read in, and then giving back some of it, but saying you gave back all of it and lying about it, there's no way to defend that. And I just think the emperor has no clothes, and we need to have some Republicans stand up and say that, because come around after the primary, I guarantee you the other party is going to be saying this, and I think it will cost us the November election. So I just don't see it as a sham indictment. I think this is what he did. I think, assuming that all the allegations are true here, I don't think you can deny it. And I think we've got to stand on the truth. And I think, and that's how Republicans will win in the long run. I think what the people are probably fearful of the base, fearful of, President Trump attacking them. But I think in the end, if you stand on the truth, you're going to win in the end.
Well, that's a beautiful sentiment. I'm not sure how true it is, particularly within the Republican Party, this idea that if you stand on truth, you win in the end. I think very often Republicans who stand on truth, which is almost a contradiction in terms, but the few like Don Bacon who do, are often punished for it. Look at Liz Cheney. Look at Adam Kinzinger. Look at Mitt Romney, who's persona non grata in the GOP, even though he still holds his seat representing Utah. Now, I want to contrast Don Bacon's principled stance here with Nancy Mace, another Republican congressperson out of South Carolina, not exactly a swing state, it's a relatively deep red state, but a person who is also considered by the media to be moderate. I've picked on Nancy Mace before because Nancy Mace has gone on Bill Maher. Nancy Mace has been interviewed by CNN. Nancy Mace has been interviewed by MSNBC, and she's very good in the moment of affecting the rhetoric and disposition of a moderate. She engages in self-deprecating humor. She is willing to occasionally call out extremism in her party, but she always does the false equivalent. So, for example, on Bill Maher, if she calls out Marjorie Taylor Greene, she has to say, well, listen, yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene's crazy, but the Democrats, they have their crazies. I mean, so it's kind of a both sides thing. And Bill Maher's like, yeah, Democrats don't have anybody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Paul Gosar, Matt Gaetz. And she's like, well, and then dissembles and deflects. She was one of the guest speakers at it was a few months ago. It wasn't the White House Correspondents' Dinner, but some sort of press event in D.C. And she gave a really good set. She was funny. She even cursed. She dropped an F-bomb, so she came off relatable and charismatic. But at the end of the day, I've long held that Nancy Mace she's not a moderate. Like, she doesn't vote like a moderate either. So she doesn't speak like a moderate when push comes to shove, and she certainly doesn't vote like a moderate. So she criticizes. She considers herself a relatively sane, moderate person on reproductive rights, and she'll condemn the Republican Party's extremism on, heartbeat bills and things like that and wanting to roll back reproductive rights. But when she votes, which is ultimately what matters, she backs her party. So whatever her principles are at the end of the day, she's willing to sacrifice them for the sake of political expedience if it helps the GOP. So these are some tweets that she had in the aftermath of the Trump indictment. Joe Biden caught on tape getting bribed, and the left looks the other way. Donald Trump slow walks documents, and they want to give him a death sentence. That's it in a nutshell. Now, obviously, this is nonsense. Joe Biden caught on tape. They're, of course, referring to the claims in this FBI document that a foreign national has claimed to have multiple recordings of then Vice President Joe Biden accepting or negotiating terms to accept like a $5 million bribe in exchange for foreign policy considerations. Those recordings, if they exist, and that's a big if, have not been produced, okay? It is an FBI document in which a credible source who worked for the FBI reported a conversation he overheard between other people. That's all it was. This occurred under the Trump administration. The Trump administration didn't do anything with it because they found the claims unsubstantiated, and so nothing was done with it. It wasn't a credible source accusing Joe Biden. A credible source said to the FBI, hey, listen, I heard these two talking. One person said that they had recordings of then Vice President Biden, blah, 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 blah. So again, it's he said, she said, right? And the Republican Party has not produced any evidence of the recordings other than that an FBI source says that somebody claims to have them. That's it. It's extremely weak. So she is lying, flat out lying about the strength of the case. So it should be said, somebody says that Joe Biden is caught on tape. We know that somebody says Joe Biden was caught on tape getting bribed, and the left looks the other way. Well, of course the left would look the other way because there's no established substance to these claims. And then the part where Donald Trump slow walks documents, no. He lied to the Department of Justice, to the National Archives, to the FBI over a span of a year and a half. The indictments lay it out pretty clear. That's it in a nutshell. So, of course, this is an incredibly dishonest tweet. She has another one. The President of the United States had his political opponent arrested today. Think about that. Well, I would think about that because that's a work of fan fiction. This is the premise to a great fan fiction that could be written somewhere. Joe Biden didn't have anybody arrested. Joe Biden's the President of the United States. Merrick Garland is the Attorney General. Merrick Garland appoints a special counsel to be independent, Jack Smith. Jack Smith convened a grand jury of Donald Trump's peers, Florida citizens, and a majority, or unanimity of them, saw the evidence against Trump, and then told the special counsel, Jack Smith, that he needed to bring charges against Donald Trump. That's how it happened. There's absolutely zero evidence that Merrick Garland pressured Jack Smith to do anything, and there's even less evidence that Joe Biden pressured anybody to do anything. So this is an unsubstantiated claim by Nancy Mace. The last thing I want to do is play a quick clip here that, we're reading her tweets, but here she is on the Fox Propaganda Network during, while Trump was en route to the arraignment, and I want you to hear it in her own words, not just read her words, but hear it in her own words, how she sees this entire situation.
Why do you think the FBI is reluctant to even acknowledge, deny, or confirm that they exist?
Well, I think after seeing the president of the United States literally try to throw in jail his #1 political opponent today, we see a lot of reasons. This is a distraction from our getting access to bribery, evidence, and allegations in the 1023 form. When President Trump was indicted by Alvin Bragg in New York, that was the day that we got access by the Treasury to the suspicious activity reports. There's a reason that there are no coincidences in politics, Brian. This is happening for a reason, to distract from the allegations and evidence of corruption, bribery, money laundering by Joe Biden and his family. That's why this is happening today.
So there you have it. That is a so-called Republican moderate saying that the credible allegations, the indictment, the evidence-laden indictment against Donald Trump for the willful retention of national defense information, obstruction, and conspiracy to obstruct, all 38 charges laid out in that 49-page report, that is not the matter of substance. That's merely a distraction. The real matter of substance, according to Nancy Mace, is that an FBI source overheard a conversation between two or more other parties, and one of those parties claimed to have audio recordings that Joe Biden accepted a bribe as Obama's vice president. There is no world in which a logical person would say that that is more substantive than what's going on with Trump. There may be something to the Republican Party's investigations of Biden. Maybe. And if and when they produce the goods on that, then we can say that that's a substantive matter. But that's not the case yet. They have no evidence. They have a claim of a person who overheard. The FBI, under Donald Trump, under Bill Barr, could not substantiate those claims when they looked into it. So you contrast that with what we've been able to substantiate, including a recording of Trump saying, hey, listen, I have these classified national defense information that I could have declassified as president, but I no longer can. It's secret. It's confidential. Here, look at it. Look at it. See, in the Trump case, we have the recording. We have a transcript of the recording. The recording exists. It will probably be played in audio form during trial, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's either sent to the public or leaked or whatever. We will hear those things. Whereas what they have on Biden is somebody said that a recording exists. They don't have a transcript. They don't have the recording. These two are not equal. Whether you like it or not, the fact, the incontrovertible fact, is that the evidence against Trump is infinitely more substantive at this time than any evidence against Joe Biden. That's a fact, regardless of how you feel about Biden or Trump, whatever your political allegiance is. But getting it back to the discussion of the two moderates, the reason that I find this so instructive is these are two people who are considered moderates, but Nancy Mace, who's a higher profile Republican than Don Bacon is. You certainly see Nancy Mace in the news more. She's just a higher profile character. She's talking effectively, when push comes to shove, like a MAGA supporter. So you have two moderates, and when push comes to shove, one of them, fully half of them, will fold and fall in line and regurgitate the same sort of conspiracy theories and MAGA talking points. And that's why I say that if there is a moderate element to the modern Republican Party, it is few and far between, and it's underfed, it's malnourished, because the fact of the matter is Don Bacon and those like him do not dictate the direction and movement of the Republican Party. So, Is the Republican Party a cult? Yes, by and large. Is Don Bacon one of the Republicans? Is he a member of that cult? No, but he either aids and abets or he's too weak to meaningfully oppose them. Whereas Nancy Mace may consider herself a moderate and may be painted by a generous media landscape as a moderate, but when push comes to shove in terms of how she votes, in terms of what she says when the chips are down, she is effectively a cultist as well. So please disabuse yourself of the notion that the GOP isn't, by and large, collectively, overwhelmingly, a bad faith, disloyal opposition cult with no limiting principle, because it clearly is.